The mono thing was probably the best thing that ever happened to our band. We just explored this outer realm of music that, it's like when the Beatles discovered acid and we discovered mono. It was like rock and roll will never be the same after that.
New Hope, Pennsylvania is known as a very peaceful and beautiful place to visit during the fall season. Many tourists are attracted to the area, and it can be a very expensive place to stay. Although it is a very relatively quiet town, there is one thing that will disrupt the peace: the beautiful and spastic sounds of Ween.
Michael Melchiondo Jr., aka Dean Ween, was born September 25, 1970, in Trenton, New Jersey. Aaron Freeman, aka Gene Ween, was born March 17, 1970, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. They met in Miss Barbara Slack's 8th grade typing class and formed Ween in 1984. Gene Ween was on vocals and Dean Ween was on guitar, although in the early cassette recordings, Dean played bass, drums, and guitar while Gene was on vocals. The reason for Ween's formation is because the demon god Boognish, on the screen right now, presented itself to Ween in typing class in 1984 when they formed. The Boognish told them to go home and record as many songs as they could that night. In all seriousness, the Boognish is just a thing they made up when they were teenagers as a joke. A quick Ween vocab word to know, because I might use it in this documentary, is the word brown, which basically means their music can sometimes be bad, but in a good way that almost makes it good, and brown basically describes a lot of their early music. Ween's earliest officially released cassettes are the Mrs. Slack EP from 1985, the Erica Peterson's Flame Your Crib Death tape, the Crucial Squeegee Lip tape, and then Axis Bold's Boognish. Along with these early cassette releases, they also had an early vinyl release called Live Brain Wedgie that also had WAD excerpts from a demo tape that they handed to friends. I know a girl named Stacy. In these years between 1984 and 1990, they played a good amount of shows and gained a pretty loyal fan base. They recorded the first official record in 1990 called God, Ween, Satan, Oneness, and released it on Twin Tone Records, and recorded many demos for the album before they recorded the whole album in their friend Andrew Weiss's home studio.
Cheers, crowd, night, DC Space, Space and Chase.
This is called Captain Fair. Alright, it's a big hit. Big cheer.
Although the other early releases have a brown feel to them, nothing is as brown as their 1991 second album, The Pod, which is what this documentary is about. This album is known for being Ween's most brown album. Just take a listen. You will be blown away by the brownness. In the recording sessions of this album, they had a disease called mononucleosis, and you can tell. They also recorded the whole album on a Tascam 4-track recorder. Just to help you understand the conditions they were in, I'll read you some of the liner notes. Recorded by Dean and Gene Ween on a Tascam 4-track cassette recorder between January and October 1990. All songs recorded at The Pod, where we lived for a year and 10 months with our cat Mandy. The Pod was scenically located on Sandvant Road in Salisbury Township, Pennsylvania. Our apartment was a haven for flies because it sits in the middle of a horse farm. In the time this album was completed, we filled up 3,600 hours of tape and inhaled 5 cans of Scotch Guard. This album was produced and mixed by Andrew Weiss, our pal, at the Zion House of Flesh, Hopewell, New Jersey. It was rumored by Ween that they inhaled 5 cans of Scotch Guard, which is not true, and do not do that. That will kill your brain cells. It was just something that they made up to kind of make you think of the crazy state they're in when they're recording the album. During the recording of this album, they had many demo tapes and songs that did not make the album. Some pod era tapes include the Bilboa tape, the Porco Lake and Cheese tape, and the Big Timmy Wasserman tape, and the Endoven EP, and the Stallion tape. There are probably many more that are not known. Almost all these tapes are surface and online except parts of the Endoven EP and basically the whole entire Porco Lake and Cheese tape. When listening to the album and listening to the demos, you may find that there are some better demos than songs that actually made it on the album. In my opinion, a good example of that is the song Mr. Mocha, which is super brown but has kind of a nice groove to it, and that song's just wonderful. You should definitely listen to it. After all the recordings, they decided on 23 songs for the album that Andrew Weiss mixed. He also picked through some of the demos and picked the songs. The album was then put out on Shimmy Disc on September 20th, 1991. The album did pretty well and had pretty good reviews by critics, which seemed kind of surprising because a lot of people didn't really understand the brownness. To this day, the pod is still cherished and is known as one of Ween's best albums by many people. Ween still plays live to this day, and they play a lot of the songs from the pod live, and it is amazing. I recently went to a Ween concert, and they played the song Oh My Dear Falling in Love from the pod live. I have a clip of it, and I'm about to show it here quickly. I think the pod has such a big legacy because it lets people know that you can have limited resources, such as just a 4-track recorder, and still make a solid and wonderful album that could even get signed to a pretty decent record label. My mom has now officially been to a Ween concert, and she took me to one in Phoenix, Arizona, so I'm going to be asking her a couple of questions about Ween. Do you think Ween showed potential in their early teenage years?
Well, they did show potential. I'm not a biggest fan of their early stuff because that's a little crazy. But after seeing them in concert, I feel like they're awesome. So that craziness of their teenage years was just them figuring out who they were, I think.
Do you think Ween got lucky that they got signed to Shimmy Disc when they put out the pod, and it being such like a low quality recorded album?
Yeah, I think that was really lucky because the way they recorded it on the 4-track didn't sound great, but they definitely lucked out.
Do you think Ween is one of the most underrated bands in the 1990s?
Well, I wouldn't really necessarily say that. Well, I wouldn't have said it before I saw them in concert, but I was pleasantly surprised at their show, so I'd say definitely they are one of the most underrated bands of the 90s.
Do you prefer Ween's first album, God, Ween, Satan, Oneness, or Ween's second album, The Pod?
I mean, the recording quality isn't the greatest on the pod, but the songs are better, more complex, and they're kind of past those early weird phases they were going through as teenagers.
What is your favorite song on The Pod?
Probably Sorry, Charlie, because of the deep storyline.
What is your favorite pod era demo tape?
Probably the Big Timmy Wasserman tape, because of the variety of songs.
What kind of legacy do you think the pod has left?
Well, I think it shows that you can be creative even with the limited resources, like the 4-track that they used to record it.
Over. The concert is over. The bouncers are sleeping.